Michael Schaefer, Ross Johnson, Matt Schultz, and Landon Fry are all here this evening.
Free.
I've been back and
I'm just gonna say it. I've been thinking it for 10 minutes. I don't want a podcast scared.
Oh yeah.
ashes. Now I've seen the road.
Pregnancy is a beautiful thing. Pregnancy is a gift.
Oh, there are stories to tell.
What kind of paint sticks to asteroids? Like, if you don't prime your wall.
Afraid some days, but the road will lead us to a better place.
We are called to emerge from that default setting of self-involvement.
I thought I told you to never call this phone number again.
Dan Schaefer, the fourth member of the Schaefer family to join the Speech Guys family.
It's an honor.
Yeah, good crisp audio too. You must be standing right next to your modem just to make sure.
Your voice sounds like
That's right.
6 times more masculine than Mike's.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was just refreshing myself on the Abolition of Man podcast, and the chestless man.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
Mike
impressive.
must have lost all the chest genes.
Yeah,
Flattery, too.
Dan has listened to at least that one episode. I know we were company to him while he's doing some drywall work in his basement.
Painting in the bathroom, in the master bathroom, but close enough.
Right. So, Dan, we have you on here tonight to introduce the episode concerning George W. Bush's speech.
Can I cut you off a little bit? Dan, can you tell me one memory of Mike from your childhood?
Oh man. There was, wow, you caught me off guard. I used him to kind of waste time at the house whenever I was supposed to be helping my dad. Maybe he was 6 years to my younger, and I remember our dad was hauling, let's say, 300-pound beams to build this barn that Dad was building for our 4-H project. Instead of helping him, since I had able body, lug around these posts or these beams or whatever else Dad needed me to do. I remember we had a pile of dirt at the house from excavating out the foundation of this barn, and I think me and Michael had a mud ramp going down into a big mud pit, and we were wallowing in the mud while we were watching Dad sweat tirelessly building a barn. So good memories.
Kind of along similar vein, I know we did go through a brief phase, maybe it was only 2 or 3 times, where we set booby traps for each other. We would stand on the porch while the other one goes set a booby trap somewhere in the yard. Obviously, it couldn't be too involved, but the one that sticks out to me, Dan created a fake booby trap that was more obvious to think that I had found the trap, and then I fell through the other one and.
Yeah, you're an easy prey. If you were a rabbit, you'd be a drowned rabbit plenty of times.
As everyone can see, Dan is the funnier man in the family. People usually don't believe, though, when I tell them that Dan is funnier than me. But it's true, as you can see here. The speech Dan's introducing tonight, the George W. Bush speech 2011. We're calling it not 2011, 2001. We're calling it the Disbelief, Sadness, and Unyielding Anger speech. If you can remember that name, Dan, that's great. Disbelief, sadness, and unyielding anger, the 3 qualities to any 21st century man.
Got it.
Before we introduce the speech, though, what are maybe some of your memories from that day? You were a freshman in college at SIU Edwardsville. I was in 7th grade. Our older sister, Lauren, was in her senior year of college at U of I. But what say you from that day?
I remember waking up to, for my morning routine, taking a shower, turning on the TV, and that's when I saw the plane, I guess the plane had just crashed into the first tower. Know what was going on. They weren't sure if it was a commercial airline gone astray type thing. They had really no clue. And I mean, there was talk of terrorism, I guess, but I remember going in, taking my shower, and then there was a second plane that had crashed. As the day progressed, I remember, classes were canceled for that day. I do remember specifically watching that speech later in the day. I guess it was the evening time, whenever I was at work. I do remember nobody was there. It was pretty much empty, but I guess the TV was on, and I remember watching that speech and that, definitely feeling moved by it in some way, patriotically.
Did you have any thoughts, considerations of joining the military based upon that day?
Of course, there was a fleeting thought, but, never a serious thought. I did remember wanting to go give blood, but with a lot of things in my life, I wanted to go do things, and then I just kind of dismiss it and not do it. Yeah, didn't give blood that day, but that was the one patriotic thing I intended to do. So if that counts for anything.
Have you given blood since?
Yeah, one time. Yep, one and done.
Okay, so also on that day, I did want to point out you did sort of coalesce your memories, your thoughts on the day into a letter. What can you share about that letter that you wrote that day?
Oh, thanks for the segue, Michael. So I wrote a letter. I have it with me. It's dated September 11th, 2001. I kind of read through it before this call. So I do feel like it's significant. So I'll read it here. Today is a terrible day in the history of our country. Today I woke up at 8:28, turned on the TV, and found a jet had crashed into the World Trade buildings. I took a morning shower and found the Pentagon had also crashed into by a terrorist board a jet. In all, 4 airliners were hijacked and crashed. The 2 into the towers, the other into the Pentagon, and the last in Pennsylvania. The Arabs are to blame for this. As of right now, I apologize. A man named Van Laden in here. He's been a problem for a while. I said I'm writing this because I believe this day will be remembered always. It will be in the history books forever. I watched how the largest towers, the largest city in America, fall to rubble. Ash engulfed the floor of the city. Gas lines are long in St. Louis here. People are hearing of gas prices soaring to $5 a gallon. Why would a people do this kind of act to another people? The TVs and radios have been carrying the story all day. ACT has taken over our thoughts and actions all day. My classes were both canceled, as were most schools. As I sit here at work at 6 p.m., there's not much new going on. I just said I feel great pride for our nation and have not felt for a while, not really for our government, but for our people, the people who make up our great free nation. In a time of tragedy, we pull together. I hope I have kids to read this to someday. And then I said, that's it. God bless America. And then I signed it Dan Schaefer. That's me. So, yeah.
And I believe you have shared it with 2 of your 3 kids, Addie and Colton, once or twice.
Yeah, definitely. Brought tears to my eyes whenever I first read the ending, hoping to have kids to read it to someday.
That was great. Thanks for sharing that, and has appropriately set the tone for the upcoming cast. And so you got the info. I'm gonna pass the ball to you. Set a good booby trap for the listener so that they are gonna fall into our podcast.
Got it. We're rolling.
We're action.
Okay, so tonight we have speeches that got someone killed, and then Mike and Ross and Matt and Landon are going to pleasure you all with their thoughts about the great speech by George W. Bush. That's it.
Boom. That's right. That's right. Thanks, Dan. And as we like to say here at the Speech Guys, now you say cue the music, Dan.
Cue the music.
That's it. Okay. Thanks very much.
When you see the road,
Michael Schaefer, Ross Johnson, Matt Schultz, and Landon Fry are all here.
It's free.
expected. I've been back in
I'm just going to say it. I've been thinking it for 10 minutes. I don't want a podcast scared.
Oh, yeah.
ashes. Now I've seen the road.
Pregnancy is a beautiful thing. Pregnancy is a gift.
Shit. Oh, there are stories to tell.
What kind of paint sticks to asteroids? Like, if you don't prime your walls.
Afraid some days, but the road will lead us to a better place.
We are called to emerge from that default setting of self-involvement. We're trying this again.
Yeah. I'm 1 second behind. I clicked it a little early, so Mike,
you
back my frame
guys
up.
are always
1,
behind.
2, 3, and you're good.
There's always some
Okay.
tweaking. Okay, on the other side of that cold open from my older brother, Dan. Dan, thank you for setting this up. As he said, George W. Bush is the speech in the speeches that got someone killed. His speech he gave on September 11th, 2001, in that evening, the first major address to a nation that needed unity, vision, justice. What else? Well, you'll find what else with the Speech Guys here tonight. Let's take a listen to that speech and go from there.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America, with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington, which had to be evacuated today, are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
Actually a recorded speech, not done live for security reasons.
Ooh, hot take. Really? I did not know that.
Yeah. Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. How about that?
Definitely felt live when I tuned in as a sixth grader. And yeah, I definitely remember watching it in its entirety 23 years ago.
Yeah. No, me too, for sure.
He scrambled. He was in Florida, and then I think the Jets just did random loops around the U.S. Then he landed in like Nebraska and Omaha, which is where like the bunker is in the mountains. And then he demanded
there are no mountains in Nebraska.
Well, okay, fair.
I was gonna say what?
I don't have the article up.
John, Denver is full of shit. There's no mountains here.
I think they scrambled. They landed at a base in Nebraska or Iowa to refuel, and the decision was like, go hunker down. And he demanded to get back to the White House to make a speech same day, get it on record.
First reactions, Landon, you sort of went organically into that. What else?
I did. I'll throw out, I did see when I skimmed through all of our notes here, a really robust document of thoughts and ideas that unfortunately our viewers are not privileged to. I saw like some topics of like discussing just war, and then I went back and read the speech, watched the speech. Having just done 5 minutes of just war definitions and theories. And the one line that kind of really stuck out to me, also with 20 plus years of what happened after this speech. Again, our title here is Speeches That Got Someone Killed. So, this speech and the people who were killed we can discuss, but he says, we will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. People, tribes, countries up for discussion here. It's a big claim. Perhaps is that a just war response?
I mean, my first reaction to the speech itself, well, I guess my first reaction, because I do remember the speech as a kid, I would say maybe similar to Dan. Just, I mean, obviously I was very young. This is like, I mean, I think we're all in 6th grade. Mike, you might have been 7th grade, I think, right? Something like that.
I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like emerging adolescent, right? Young adolescent. I think there was, yeah, a for sure sense of pride, a sense of like in our nation and whatnot, just from this speech and things that you saw in history book or you read in history books and like stories and heroes and things. And I'm like, okay, this is like a situation where like heroes will emerge in some way, shape, or form, you know, not necessarily like George Bush per se, like the speech giver, but just, yeah, I just thought it was kind of a cool, heroic sounding speech. I would say, I mean, similar reaction to the, you know, reading it or hearing it again as an adult. I guess I can't help but think just of how unified we were in the wake of this, and how, yeah, I just how muffled the response would have been today, and just so some of the just the changes that have occurred on that front. So I guess that's maybe my first thought or reaction to hearing it as an adult.
Yeah. This did, 95% of America was completely just on the same page.
The reason that I chose this speech, I wish I could say there's something super profound, but there's not necessarily. It just felt a natural idea that was sort of different from Ross's, obviously, speeches that got someone killed. So, you know, who's getting killed in this speech? Well, Osama bin Laden was obviously killed because of everything that transpired in the years afterwards. You know, some number of, let's see. So I jotted down the numbers. About 2,500 Americans were killed in the Afghanistan war. 2,000 civilian contractors, which I thought that was crazy. That's almost 1 for 1. That was over 20 years. Some uncertain number of veteran suicides from that war due to PTSD. Obviously, the several thousand people who were killed at the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, on the planes on that day. So you're looking among all of those about 180,000 people among Americans and non-Americans killed around this event. I guess technically the speech didn't quote unquote kill anyone on 9/11, everyone after that, in a sense. But
right. I had a higher number. I've got the number at 1 million according to Carnegie.
1 million. Okay, how did you get 1 million?
Carnegie Institute, it's civilians and combatants. So there's the Afghanistan 250,000, Iraq 250,000, and it is like all after effects of 9/11. So Iraq,
sure,
plus Afghanistan, plus like Syria was destabilized 500,000, and then it stops at that, which is right at almost 1 million people. But there are Libya and several other Middle East countries were destabilized because of this. So like it's at least 1 million. You could even say up to 5 million.
So I wait. Well, I mean, I don't know, wish is a strange word. You know, it's almost 23 years since the event. It's June. There is no significant anniversary on which we're discussing this topic. But, you know, as I said, Dan was a freshman in college. I was in 7th grade. And when I was in 7th grade, the rest of you guys were 6th. And, you know, there is, after prepping for this over the past couple of days, I sort of describe an experience similar to when I was prepping for a speech from the beginning of the year, President Reagan, the Challenger disaster. And I think when you're in 7th grade, it's like the rest of the world is just it's very sterile. It's very cartoonish in a sense, but it still occupies a certain place in your mind. It's like, oh yeah, I know that 9/11 happened, but then so it takes up a certain place. But then you revisit, you know, I was listening to this audio of different passengers and some from the terrorists themselves, and I found my eyes getting teary again, imagining these passengers on the airplane in the final seconds before it hit this building. And there's something profoundly vivid about thinking about them again this way. And so choosing the speech just sort of gives an opportunity to revisit this experience in a more material and adult way. So that's why I chose speech. Anything particular about the speech that strikes me? I mean, we're of course a George Bush family. We're on Team Bush. So, you know, we're in his corner for this, and it does mark the beginning of this era of unity, both meaningful unity in terms of the votes that were cast to go to war in Afghanistan, but also the country songs, the Old Navy American flag T-shirts. Not a single corner of unity was ignored there. And I remember feeling like there was something cheap to that or fake. What do you guys remember about the brand of unity then? Or what you might have thought about it?
I certainly wasn't thinking that deeply on it about like cheap or fake. I would say like, I think the first time where I maybe felt that way was and I don't know how, I can't remember the timeline, but the Toby Keith Put a Boot in Their Ass, it's the American Way song, I think was the first time I felt like, and there's some part of just like an immature high school, or I don't know, middle school, however old I was when that song came out, that was like, thought that might have been kind of cool, but like I would definitely felt like some disconnect there. I remember, there's a family member who I remember like playing that song on a trip. We were going. This is like a cousin of mine, and he seemed to like be really into it. And I was like, oh yeah, I like my cousin. Like he's great, and he's a great guy. But yeah, I've always had a little bit of disconnect there with that. Yeah, that specific thing, but. Oh yeah, I don't remember it being cheap much. You know, I think I don't know. I guess I thought it was fairly sincere almost.
Yeah, I did too. I didn't feel at all unsincere or not genuine. I think it started to like late by 2010 maybe, and then like things like American Sniper came out, where the first 10 minutes of the movie was like their response to seeing the news, and then like Chris Kyle and Rolls and like he's the sheepdog. He's gonna like protect the country, and there's kind of a just to try to I don't know if it was like remembering or like putting yourself in the context 10 years prior to what those people who did see this and like enroll immediately, and like we're all the people on the ground in Afghanistan and Iraq the last 20 years. But yeah, it didn't there was no irony or disconnection for it for me at the time.
Mike, were you just a hipster that was upset that you were on Team Bush when it was just a 50% approval rating, and then it jumped to 90 overnight, and you weren't cool anymore?
I do remember, similar to Dan, I do remember the gas being $5 a gallon for a day or maybe a couple of days, and us going to, my mom took me to DQ for some reason that day. I remember exactly where we sat, kind of down on the main floor in one of the 2-person booths. And I asked her if Dan and Dad might get drafted, and my dad was obviously too old to be drafted at that point, but she said maybe Dan. And I remember kids at school the next day, Amy asked if there's going to be, like, is there going to be a World War III? And doesn't the Bible say the world ends at World War III? And so you had all of those things going. I do also remember a sense of dread.
What are you, an evangelical or something?
A sense of dread. Like, do you guys get it's so rare one gets a sense of dread. Like, do you guys get that ever?
I don't know. Like in a,
like,
yeah, I guess I don't
know it when you have it.
I don't know it. I don't
know. Pollyanna here, dancing around in his skirt.
Everything's fine.
I've had it 2 exact times, for sure, in my life. Once was this September 11th, and the other was, it wasn't long. It was very brief. It was maybe like for a couple days or something. But right before or right at the time of lockdown with COVID, because I think it's a combination of something bad and uncertainty and not knowing how it's going to play out.
Well, I think I always had like a sense of, or at least like, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some immaturity here, especially with 9/11, but a sense of like this, maybe more so than dread, is to like, oh, like there's a serious, because I think I was 11 years old, so like way away from any sort of military age. I think at that point in time, I was like, I had as sincere as a conviction as a 11-year-old can have, or 12, whatever, I guess almost 12, that like military would have been a good thing. And like, I guess I was thinking about it more, for maybe like 6 months or so, in the aftermath of that. And I would say, I was like, oh, like military, like I should do, like, I don't know, you hear stories about people doing it, and I admired those stories. I thought they sounded really heroic, and like they are. So like, yeah, I mean, as an 11-year-old, again, that didn't last, it wasn't a serious enough thing to, and, certainly, I mean, within, I don't know, 3 years after 9/11, like the tables totally turned on our patriotism in that scenario, at least in public opinion. Maybe that's too soon. I don't know exactly the timetable on that, but, and I think that very quickly waned in me. But I think I almost had a similar idea in the beginning of COVID, that I would like have to do these like 16-hour shifts, like working at a hospital and like triaging people outside because there wasn't room. And, in part because of, I think, just media exaggerations and projections and things, when we didn't know much. And then what it actually ended up looking like was like these really short shifts in the hospital because we had too many people who weren't doing their normal jobs. So we had too many workers. So they're just finding random crap to do. And I was wiping butts, and like that was, which, yeah, I think maybe that's just kind of like the maturity thing. Like heroism sometimes does look like wiping butts, and, yeah, it's just different.
Landon,
I kind of had the. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, you link the Straussian moment here. We need to get our legs under us. We need to start chewing on something. The Straussian moment, Peter Thiel. Can you sort of introduce that article and why you found it interesting?
Absolutely, yeah. Was gonna quickly say, I did have the opposite, Matt. I grew up in like a farm town, and it really never crossed my mind to like join in. I always just, for some reason, I think I studied like atomic bombs like in 5th grade for some half-page paper. I was like, yeah, even if they dropped an atomic bomb,
you studied bombs.
If they dropped a bomb on Chicago, like it still wouldn't affect us. And I just like the coast and like news and like I was like, that's for like those people. Like nobody cares. Nothing's ever. There's nothing that will affect us like out here in farm country. Like we tune into the Today Show for a half an hour every morning just to see like a glimpse of the outside world, but like nothing, it didn't ever really trickle down. And so, like this place way far away in New York City was hit. Fascinating. How do they feel? I wonder. And it just never crossed my mind that it really impacted me. And like, I don't know. I mean, yeah, high gas prices, etc. It was life-changing to a degree, but it just seemed like it wasn't the civilization I was living in. Part one. Part two, yeah, I think that this moment, a really good paper that I come back to a lot, it's called the Straussian moment. Right? Yeah, moment. Yeah. Peter Thiel wrote it.
Peter Thiel,
primary investor on Facebook. How many page? 15 page PDF. Basically, it reads kind of like a graduate level paper on 400 years of Western philosophy and how to understand the way that Western Westernism, Western psychology, Western capitalism, and it's kind of hitting a wall moment with the reality that there still are perhaps 2/3 of the world that just don't subscribe to what has happened in Europe and North America since the Renaissance. And Peter Thiel is
why don't you put a fine point on that? What has happened, would you say, since the Renaissance in the West that has not happened?
God is dead. We don't need God. Science solves everything, and everybody agrees on this worldview. And of course, we all want peace, and and of course, like, the devil and God, that's all kind of spiritual. That's not a primary consideration to how we organize our societies and our laws and our governments. Now, of course, this wasn't that as true in 1776. We said, our rights are from God, but as we've gone through the centuries, especially up into the 20th, like, that has eventually eroded. And then with the attack by Islamic fundamentalists on the heart of our economy and its representation in the Twin Towers, our enemy is not somebody wanting to make more money than us or to defeat us. It is like it is perhaps a group of tribal people who think that we are evil or we are not of their religion, and that is the type of war that was fought in the 1400s, not in the 21st century. And Peter's thesis is that basically, pre-Western ideology actually still exists in the world, and maybe in a very large portion, and maybe even it's growing. And he is a Christian. He brings in some of his medic theory and scapegoating that we've talked about in prior podcasts on Rene Girard. And that he basically kind of says, like, if you are a Christian and you are an American, like, you need to weave all these things together. You need to consider them for how to view the world. And the last paragraph is really good. The Christian statesman must diverge in the teachings of Strauss. That's not that interesting. And in determining the correct mixture of violence and peace, the Christian statesman would be wise in every close case to side with peace. There's no formula for this. We don't know what a close case means, but it must go with peace in every specific interest. He goes on to say, for the world could be different from this modern world. It could be much, much worse than it is today, or it could be much better. The limitless violence, i.e. probably the atomic bomb, of runaway mimesis, of runaway competition with China or Russia or etc., or the peace of the kingdom of God will prevail. So, like, he pulls in Revelation type themes to his political, cultural, religious worldview that actually, even though it's 2024, there's a spiritual underline here that goes much beyond simple trade agreements and making sure that everyone feels comforted in their economics. So that is kind of his seminal piece coming. Basically, his description of 9/11 is called the Straussian moment. Go read it, and it's interesting.
So reading that reminded me of at least one, and I've heard, I think Ben Shapiro has rightly riffed on this. But NPR, there's a lot of attribution of terrorist activity in the Middle East due to the effects of climate change. Something to the effect of like, well, look, see, things are getting hotter and that's why they're doing this. It's not enough, something like that, which maybe there's like 0.3% of truth to that, rather than dealing with the content of the belief system that opposes, like the article seems to be saying, the West itself. That stuck out to me. Another, I don't know, you might sort of find this interesting.
Landon, what did you say? So in the Straussian moment, you mentioned that, like, kind of the summary of kind of like modern Western civilization, where you said like science solves everything and like a couple other points. Could you repeat those? I thought.
Yeah. He, in the meat of this paper, Peter breaks down, if you take the great philosophers of the last 100 or 200 years and extrapolate the direction that each of them thought the West was on, he kind of, he essentially breaks down each of their arguments to like, you're wrong because of this, you're wrong because of that. Like, all of them were most of them were secular, and he does critique their secularness with a Christian spiritual lens. And what he kind of the fine point is, like, if all of you are right, like 9/11 wouldn't have happened, or
Sure.
maybe the response to 9/11 wouldn't have happened. Like the fact that 9/11 happened, like, breaks the logic in your
theory.
arguments, and therefore this is a resetting. And also I think there is just a pretty large, I'm just going back to just fundamentalism, Girard teaching, like the A-bomb is just always a much bigger deal than we even think about in our everyday lives. Like now so many countries do have the ability to just completely obliterate each other, perhaps the world, and that's a different power dynamic. Well, that's a power dynamic that directly leads to like the end times, or we can keep maintaining the peace. And what does that mean?
I'm just thinking about, like, in a world where science solves everything, like kind of preserving the Kush economy, are kind of like your guiding principles. I would almost see it as like that type of environment makes it seem like it's impossible to have a just war. If those are your guardrails for life, I don't know. Maybe that's not a.
I sort of see what you're getting at, but spell it out a little bit more.
I guess in lieu of what Landon describes as like the middle age sort of mentality, in lieu of like having actual values that mean something and that are worth dying for, if in place of that you have this desire for like, let's just all get along and have a nice economy, and science will solve our problems eventually if we just trust the science, and hand over power to whoever will solve the problems, like things will be fine, right? If that's your perspective, and and like maybe that's just too cartoonish of a representation to like actually have a serious thought on it, but it would seem impossible that there would ever be a circumstance that would like count as a just war, simply because there's nothing worth dying for, like, or there, I don't know, maybe the Kush economy is worth dying. I don't know. I guess it just seems like you're doomed to this kind of ebb and flow in this weird dance that we've gone through, like hyper security with like some of the NSA stuff that happened in the wake of 9/11, and then you go from that to like complete pacifism, like we deserved 9/11 because we're not, we contributed to climate change and made lives terrible for the Middle Easterners. It just seems like there's no room for any just war there. Like you can't even broach the conversation because of these ships that never intersect with each other.
I kind of, I wouldn't. We could list out the points of just war. I wrote them.
Yeah, we're going that way. Go ahead, list them out.
I think just war, contemporary Catholic doctrine version. There might be others. There probably are. A, the damage inflicted by the aggressor, so by Islamic terrorists on the U.S., must be lasting, grave, and certain. And then all other means of putting an end to, I'll use 9/11 for an example to make it really clear. All other means of putting an end to Islamic terrorism must have been shown to be impractical or ineffective. There must be serious prospects of succeeding in eliminating Islamic terrorism, and the use of arms, the use of retaliation to Islamic terrorism must not produce evils or disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated.
Yeah, let's go through them, shall we? Honestly, the second three seem very relevant to September 11th. The first one, not so much. What do you guys think? The damage inflicted by the aggressor on the nation must be lasting, grave, and certain. Does it need to have all three of those things? I don't feel like it's... Well, I mean, yeah, lasting.
It was a one-hit wonder.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? It was grave. It was certain. Yep. But it definitely was not well. In hindsight, it wasn't lasting. It was certainly unknown at the time, especially at the speech.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's just one dynamic that in the times where just war theory, in the time that just war theory has been like explicated, terrorism was not. I mean, I suppose there are acts of terror. One random tribe invading another tribe, whatever. But yeah, it's also like this was developed in a time where there were nation states, and they all kind of did this sort of thing, and yeah, it's interesting to think about. Like, I don't know that it needs to be revised. That's not what I'm saying. But it is just such a unique, it's a unique thing to try to fit into this because of that reason. Like, I'm sure there are still Islamic terrorists who would love to attack the United States. I think that's a safe assumption. But at the same time, it's not the same ones, maybe, right? They're different countries and, slightly different motives. And I don't know.
Mike, how did you distinguish point 1 from point 2 through 4? What exactly were you saying about point 2 through 4?
I was just saying that they all seemed on par with the Afghanistan war. I mean, I suppose maybe the last one might require more intensive research. The use of arms must not produce evils and disorders graver than the evil to be eliminated. I mean, how many new terrorists did activity in Afghanistan and Iraq create? I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. I definitely probably question 2 through 4 more than point 1. Like, I mean, we turned around and pretty much went straight to Afghanistan. I don't know if we really tried anything else to know that it was impractical or ineffective.
Yeah, but it obviously goes with what Matt was just saying. It's like, what if Putin attacked us, like, we would know exactly how to go about being diplomatic with him.
Yeah.
Versus Bin Laden.
I mean, they're probably at the time it was like, oh, we need to go find a rogue tribe in Afghanistan. Like, we're the U.S. Of course we're going to succeed at this. And then in hindsight, 22 years later, we replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. Maybe there weren't serious prospects of success.
But at the same time, it's like, I feel like we may discuss this on another podcast. It feels like we avoid, like, another September 11th could have easily happened.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, and that's such a big unknown. I don't know. Like, who the hell knows how lasting this is? It's just such a novel means of warfare that the world isn't, like, still hasn't really adjusted to yet, I don't think.
Maybe it's a final bell and you can just be like, beep, table it for later. But, like, we just read through this. We read the speech. We're back on September 11th. We're listening to this George Bush. We have the complete knowledge of what transpired 2 decades later. Would we go to war and go hunt him down or not? Like, was all of this worth it? We can save it for later, too, if that's...
To answer Landon's question, I don't, like, I don't remember exactly how you worded it. Would we go hunt him down? I heard that as if I was a, 18-year-old man, like, would I have joined the armed forces and whatnot? And I don't think that I would have. It seemed, I don't think I would have felt so in danger that it would have required my like when I think of war and just war and all those things, like I know this isn't the technical definition by any means, but like I think of it in terms of like a self-defense type thing. And it feels more like we got hit, but there was other ways to prevent us being hit again. Are all means exhausted. Like I don't know if that has to be like diplomatic, like we shake hands, or like are there other ways we can prevent 9/11 from happening without going to war?
Yeah, I would add like we've spent 8 trillion specifically on 9/11 follow-up wars. $30,000 per man, woman, and child. Every American. I don't know much about like 9/11 victims and the firemen and policemen, but like I feel like I've heard some horror stories of like how hard it is for them to get like some pretty basic treatment on some of the stuff they've had. Yeah. I think you rewind the clock, you can spend 8 trillion on quite a few better things than where we ended up putting it.
I think it's like a temptation, but I don't know, just thinking about just running with the just war thing a little bit, because that's where it is right now. Like, I don't think you can use hindsight, though. There's no way of knowing that in the moment. It's like you just have to use the information that you have to the best of your ability. And I'm not saying that was or wasn't done, but I just think it's dangerous to use any sort of hindsight, because then we're going to say, oh, they made the wrong decision or the right decision, but like they didn't have that information at the time. So I don't know if you can, judge the decision with information that just wasn't accessible.
It is not the best use of mental or emotional energy for hindsight, but like really being critical of the prior 2 decades of war. We're basically in another 2 wars now with Israel and Gaza and Ukraine and Russia. And like, I think the use of hindsight is to like apply it to what's next. Some ongoing chess war that is either back to the Straussian moment. Like, we should pretty much always lean towards the side of peace in every close case, because the rest is just flirting with nuclear annihilation.
Even just a little bit of the history of Osama bin Laden pre 9/11. I mean, the CIA supported the group that he was a part of.
Oh, are we at the conspiracy part now?
Conflict with. No. I'm just saying. Good one. Just as like, maybe this is just a cautionary tale. Maybe U.S. worried about Russia. Seems fair. Russia was big and scary back in the 70s. Throw a bunch of money at Afghan militant groups to fight the Soviets. Great, that worked out. But now those groups don't like us, and then they attack us, and now we spend more money trying to like suppress those groups for the next almost 20 years, and then we pull out because we decide. I don't know what was part of that decision, but rather abruptly, it would seem that like, all right, that's not worth it anymore. Literally back to square one. Right, like Taliban's still in control of Afghanistan. Last I had checked, maybe that's changed. I don't know. It seems like no one in the Middle East likes us a ton, right? Like, I guess Teddy Roosevelt once said, like, walk softly and carry a big stick. I don't know, just do your thing and be ready if something comes to. I know, like something did come to our soil, so like that does make this particular thing maybe a little trickier. But
correct, yeah, fair.
But I don't know. I mean, I was going to say just the other thing with there is so much. I mean, especially with military operations, there's so many levels of clearance, security clearance and whatnot that like the 4 of us have like maybe 2% of the information. Like, and this is after us looking things up. You know what I mean? Like, the average person has fraction of 2%, and it's, yeah, maybe I'm just a little bit nihilistic when it comes to foreign policy, and especially because of like some of the Straussian moment stuff you mentioned, Landon, where like
and
totally different
physical
part of the world.
therapy.
And physical therapy. We don't want to go down that road tonight. But yeah, it just seems like it's impossible. It's an impossible calculus. This is like 5D chess, and we don't know what the fifth
Yeah.
dimension is yet. I don't
So
know.
okay, so that's an interesting thought that maybe you can play with. And so what are then the lesson? What are some of the lessons for your typical American family post 9/11? What's Dan telling his kids about what he experienced that day and take away?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking in terms of the small things that you do. Like, it is interesting what were the small things people might have done differently or more after the event. How did we think of our president differently, for better or for worse, or vice president? So one thing small that does immediately stick out to me, I'm sure you guys remember, but I remember in high school, do you guys remember the t-shirts that said "Not My President"? That had George Bush's face on it. You don't remember those?
Maybe in like I believe maybe a little.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys just all red, white, and blue at your school. We had but like, goths and hipsters wear them. But anyway, I felt like that was the first time I saw something like that. And not saying that is the first time something like that existed. Maybe part of it was my age. It doesn't seem like that kind of disrespect towards your leader, especially when it's not paired with something else like worthwhile. Because it's like the kid, I can picture a kid wearing it. His name's Nick. Like you're not doing anything else to improve on our situation. You're just crapping on someone's decision that, as Matt said, we know less than 2% of the knowledge that he does in making these decisions. And it's like, what does that gain? And then you can imagine the things with social media. They're all sort of like little brothers of that behavior, of crapping on this or that thing, not providing any meaningful solution.
Yeah, I like that. And I think especially I didn't watch the whole thing, but I watched maybe a 10-minute chunk of the documentary that you posted, Mike, on the outline. And I think one of the things I like about our podcast is bringing things down home.
Yep.
There are lots of big ideas percolating, but when it comes to meeting someone on the sidewalk, or whatever, just dealing with your neighbors, like how does that pertain? And I guess I'm just reminded of some of the it's like, as terrifying of a situation as that must have been for someone trying to leave these towers before they collapse. This lady almost had a fondness of like her, so she like shared her inhaler with someone who had asthma, right? Like, normally you don't share inhalers. Like, I'm sure Joint Commission would have a field day on that one, but it's like, wow, like and then this girl like could breathe and she can get down and, I don't know, presumably I don't know, if this lady made it, maybe this other girl made it too, hopefully. And just these like little things like that saved this woman's life, right? Just sharing an inhaler with her. And there's almost this fondness for that, right? It's like the poem in the that's quoted in the beginning of A Hidden Life. I know we've referenced that movie a lot. I feel like we should have a Speech Guys movie list.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll publish that for the platinum members or something, but that would certainly be on there. But it's the something to the effect of that the world isn't half as bad as it could be is largely due to people in unmarked graves and whatnot, because there is a lot more to 9/11 than the geopolitical fallout. There is a lot more to 9/11 than, conspiracy theories and, um, you know, political melodrama. Um, yeah, like I think our country did come together in an authentic way, and in authentic ways, in like the Toby Keith Old Navy sorts of ways. Um, but yeah, and at the end of the day, like that is something meaningful nonetheless, and certainly meaningful to the woman whose life was saved by an inhaler. The EMT who has this, like, I imagine, like, he'll never deal with anything quite as crazy as that, so like now he's this, kind of unshakable veteran, in his field. Maybe in the words of George Bush, you can't dent the steel of American resolve. Yeah, if you're a virtuous person, and you take that stuff uh, and pivot it into as good of a thing as you can.
The steel of American resolve. It's a play on industry and hearts all in one.
Mike, kind of the whole, like, what do you take from it? What do what did it make you feel about the president? How do you talk to your kids about it? I don't remember exactly what you said, but I have found, like, and actually not before this speech, but like 9/11 in particular has been a way that talking about it to the kids a little bit, because my two oldest are old enough now to know, like, on 9/11 it gets talked about at school and whatnot. It's like they're aware of what it was. You can't sugarcoat, like, or pivot or divert from what happened. So, like, I feel like, and my kids are still relatively little, so it's right. So my oldest is almost 8, 6, 4, and 1. But I feel like other, quote unquote bad things you can just distract them from. What's a bad guy? Well, Dad will protect you. We're fine. Like, there's just, like, there's ways to make it seem like it's not going to happen. Or even death is like, well, like, they haven't had any, like, peers pass away, because they're little. So it's like, he was really old, way older than anybody you know. So, like, it's almost like make it seem like it's not a real thing. And I found, like, when they talked about 9/11 in school, that was maybe the first time, at least in our, I think that's the first time it comes to my mind of, like, there was just no way to talk around it. It was just like, yeah, like, some people did a really bad thing. People died. And yeah, I mean, they don't know, obviously, a lot of details and terrorists and, like, what all that stuff means. But I don't know, like, as far as talking to the kids, and I feel like it was almost like I don't want to say good way, but they took it maybe like, I don't know, I think sometimes kids can handle more stuff than at least I had given them credit for. But that was at least in talking to the kids, that was one of the first times we had talked to them about something that there was no way to put a cherry on top. It was just, this was bad. I also heard something interesting. I was listening to a podcast today about D-Day. I don't know if you guys listened to the Art of Manliness podcast on D-Day a couple weeks ago. A guy has written a book that's pretty much a compilation of first-person accounts, because there's very few people left that were there on D-Day. And he uses 9/11 as an example, or like a comparison, because he said the reason he wanted to write the book on D-Day was because, like, we are literally there are almost no people left that, were there. So in his mind, it was kind of like one of the last opportunities to gather, first-person accounts. And so anyway, but he talked about, so I don't remember how he said what does he say? Memory is passing into history, or something like that. I forget the exact quote. But he kind of talked about 9/11 similarly for the first time, we have people in the military, we have people that are, joining the fire department and police departments of New York City that they literally weren't even born on 9/11. So, like, for them, it's not a memory. There's no, like, it's completely, like, in the past, in history. And I don't know, I just kind of thought that was interesting.
Yeah, sure.
What about the conspiracy theories?
Okay, conspiracy. Yeah, I guess so. Conspiracies. So, 9/11, 9/11, obviously one of these...
You guys are enjoying your microchips. I am too.
Yeah, I have Bluetooth everywhere I go now.
I love my microchip. It's great.
Yeah, so 9/11, obviously one of these things that attracts a lot of conspiracy theories like other significant world events, COVID and the shape of the world. Yeah, creation itself. Is it right? Is it responsible? Is it harmless? Is it okay to entertain conspiracy theories around something like this where so much life was lost? And I'm gonna qualify that in a second there. There is something to be said for when we're talking about conspiracies, in terms of like the shape of the earth. There is something that at some level that's like harmless about it. It's like, okay, these people think the world is flat, whatever. Whereas you're doing something like this, there's a certain, undoubtedly thousands of lives were lost on this particular day. And it seems like a certain amount of seriousness should be rendered it, right? At the same time, it's like, yeah, there is something to be said for considering other possibilities of things.
Just to poke holes, so many lives were lost. Another way you could say what you just said is like, so many lives were lost. How could you possibly question the primary narrative of which, like, so many lives were lost? Wouldn't you question everything? Like, who and why did this happen? Like, that should be the question, like, all day long.
Why would you not investigate it if it's
versus like, here's what we heard almost the first day that it happened.
Well, just to briefly respond, I wouldn't say no. I said treating it with a certain amount of seriousness.
Correct. Yeah.
I guess the thing with the 9/11 conspiracy theories that's interesting isn't so much the theories. I think it's just, I don't know, they just seem rather implausible. Haven't done a deep dive, I'll admit, but just it seems like for every point, there's a very strong counterpoint in regard to like, oh, this, it was a demolition because of thermite or some random weird thing. It seems like there's rather, I don't know, credible people. Just doubting that, poking holes in the hole pokers. I think it's just an interesting group of people, right? It seems like you have the people who just didn't like Bush and are like, oh, it's the Bush family just trying to get access to Middle Eastern oil, or just to it's them trying to pick fights in the Middle East. And then you'll have, I think, more conservative folks saying like, oh, this is the government trying to justify surveillance system on us, and just these different, just kind of an odd coalition of people who seem to be really into these sorts of theories. I guess that's what kind of sticks out to me with.
I'll go ahead and offer up two to be blown up, and these are the two that I've heard. Well, the first one I think I've heard reverberate through a lot of different places. The first one would be Building 7, which was like three buildings collapsed that day. Building 7 crumbled to the ground at about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. Pretty tall, but I don't know how many stories it was, but free fell. And then there's kind of like all of the things that are odd about it, like who was in there, the SEC, Secret Service, CIA. But the catcher is like the BBC reported that it had collapsed while it was in the background of their reporting on it. And I don't think that it's been disproven that that was a fact. Happy to blow that out of the water. But pretty big building fell. It was not directly hit, and it just collapsed out of nowhere. So that's like an interesting one. And then the other one that really gets me, and I even did a little more research on it for this episode. The day before September 10th, Rumsfeld holds a press conference and admits the Department of Defense has lost and cannot account for $2.3 trillion of spending. I mean, you can go to C-SPAN and look this one up.
What in the
Rumsfeld
world?
holds a press conference. $2.3 trillion. Yeah, it is unaccounted for. Don't ask us.
What in the
So
world?
at that time, the DoD's annual expense was $300 billion. So Rumsfeld got up in front of C-SPAN and said, "We don't know where the last 8 years of every dollar the DoD has been allocated." 8 years of the entire budget of the DoD, we're not sure. And then on September 11th, the wing of the Pentagon is completely destroyed that would have any possible accounting of that. Those are the two that are just kind of like, what's going on here?
To tie it back to the question, I feel like my first thought would be to place the 9/11 conspiracies more in the first one you said, which is, something to the effect that it's, I don't know if disrespectful is the right word, but just, I think the weight of what happened demands a very, serious, solemn how you look at it. So, with any sort of, I guess conspiracy, like the smell test or whatever, but I feel like the heavier the weight of the event, the more you need to consider a conspiracy theory for it. Because I feel like what I was thinking was well, why do people think this? Did they actually get presented with some evidence that was so compelling that they were forced to look into it? Or is it more like conspiracies are kind of fun and yeah, sure, I'll kind of hype on that trend a little bit. And I feel like I think it can go into more of a disrespect to jump on a kind of a fun conspiracy. So I feel like something as serious as 9/11, I think it would have to be a quality of evidence to believe a conspiracy, and even consider a conspiracy or even talk about it. I feel like it would have to be very high. Or I do think you can kind of wade into the, oh, this happened, or maybe it was this, but it's I think the one thing we know happened was, a lot of people died. And I think you have to have that kind of lens when you think about it.
I mean, Matt, I think your example that you shared in the notes was sort of a useful example of why don't you just tell the example?
Yeah, so this was sixth grade. This is maybe a week or two or so after September 11th, but I guess it sounded like it was a school-wide thing that the teachers were gonna set aside time, let's just say fifth period or whatever it was, and be all right, we want to at least give you guys a chance to talk about feelings or thoughts or whatever that you have about September 11th, more or less just to, I guess have an open environment on it, encourage kids to share whatever. I don't know if it was the first thing. Some details are fuzzy because it was a long time ago, but among the first few kids who raised their hands and said anything, I think he asked the teacher, is it true that Osama bin Laden, or whatever. He basically just listed out a conspiracy theory, just asking the teacher if this is true. I don't even remember it being super scary or super whatever, but whatever it was, the teacher thought it was just out of line and just unnecessarily frightening. Said to the student something to the effect of, That's exactly the type of thing that that's just meant to scare people. And he was sent to the principal's office. And I'm laughing not because it's a serious thing, and as a teacher I've got zero clue how I would handle that, but yeah, there is a certain funny irony and just be open and just ask questions, and question number 2, don't ask this, get out of here.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of this yeah, it's this touchy dynamic of how much curiosity is appropriate versus not, or what types of curiosity is appropriate versus not. And I mean, maybe some of the points I made earlier, just how little everyone knows, I think is just way underestimated in any foreign policy related discussion topic. That, yeah, it's just, yeah, I think it's just an interesting example of how the world interacts with conspiracies.
And I think I wrote this in our notes, isn't that why they executed Socrates? Did he not stir up the youth to question the state?
Well, yeah, I mean, a broad way, yeah, but he wasn't positing conspiracy theories.
He seemed much more reasonable than
but he didn't.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and it depends on the way you.
Correct. That was a framing that fit the answer. But how far of a stretch is it? I'm trying to rein myself.
Well, I mean, I think to answer it, one needs to define what a conspiracy. I mean, we're starting to go back down holes we've been in before, but it's what is a conspiracy theory? It has to hinge at some level on saying that this is the truth, and the only reason it's not believed at a broader scale is because this other group doesn't want you to believe it. And now that it can still sometimes be true, but even if it's true, that's still going to be the mechanism that's there. And all I'm saying is that I don't think that's where Socrates was coming from. Yeah, as far as the student example, is who knows, what it could have been obvious that the student was asking it in a way that he was just wanting to get attention.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't recall the detail, I don't recall the dynamics if that was a sincere question versus
or if it was innocent, then well, yeah, and he was just parodying something that his dad had said at home or something. Well, then you certainly wouldn't send him to the office. But yeah, there is something instructive in taking seriously your own questions that you ask. I know the podcast that I've referenced, Michael Shermer, the libertarian neurologist and conspiracy theory expert as a sociological force. He's referenced the child sex ring run by Democrats in the basement of the pizza place out in Washington, D.C., the Pizzagate thing. You're familiar? Pizzagate. Not the one Matt did.
Sure.
Ruined Gladiator. And there was the one guy who went to this pizza restaurant thinking that there was a child sex ring in the basement, and they didn't even have a basement. And the point that he was making is that, to this guy's credit, he actually believed there was a sex ring, and then he went out and did something about it, right?
Sure.
Versus how many people would have said they believed that same thing and no, didn't do anything about it. They would have claimed they believed 100%, but they didn't do anything about it. And just the point being is that, yeah, I mean, a conspiracy theory, well, sure, it's reasonable and entertaining, but you have to take seriously the question itself, and if you're not willing to act on it, then I don't think it's responsible to talk about, really. And I mean, outside of a bonfire with friends versus an online forum. Final bell.
Ding, 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 ding.
All your strength, all your power, all your love.
Where is it? 15. One more round. There's no stopping this now. This is our round. Don't stop it now. Just starting. We don't stop. All your spirit, all your power, all your love, everything you've got. This is the whole life here. Do it now. Now.
If you could, I don't know. I'm just going to go with my knee-jerk reaction. If you could pick any other president, living or dead, to take the place of George Bush, giving the speech, act war on terror, who would it be and why? Oh, and we'll make this a little more interesting too. They could just be a political figure. So they've never been president. Maybe they ran for president.
Oh. Okay.
So if I say G-Dub, are you going to think I mean George Bush, or are you going to think I mean George Washington?
That is from his 2000 primary acceptance speech. That was how he got the largest applause when he accepted the Republican primary in 2000. I don't remember what state it was in, but he's up there and he's like alluding to why he should be the Republican nominee. And he's talking about George Washington, and he turns to the audience and he goes, and his friends called him George W. And the crowd just erupted, and that is why he became president.
Nice.
I remember it distinctly. I watched it live. I was a 10-year-old. Still just burned in my memory.
While you guys are thinking, so I did, for curiosity and research, search 9/11 conspiracy theories on Spotify to see what came up, and I saw one with Jimmy Akin in it. You guys know Jimmy Akin, the Catholic apologist. Yeah.
I know the name. I don't know anything about it.
For Catholic answers. Really big beard. He looks like a guy from Duck Dynasty. And like I've really grown to like respect him a lot. Like he is so charitable and humble and super duper knowledgeable. So I saw this, I was like, no, Jimmy, no, don't. And so they start this podcast, and there's like a subtitle to this podcast. So like, was it an inside job? It had like this weird font. And I was like, oh boy. So I started listening, and he just went through every conspiracy theory and explained why they were not true. But he did it again in this very like humble way. He's like, well, anything's possible, but here's all the reasons that this doesn't seem to be the case. And la. But yeah, it was really interesting. But Jimmy Akin.
Did he address the $8 trillion that was missing?
No, he didn't do that one, but he did address the Israel and Mossad one.
I'm interested enough in that one, I might Google it just to see where the $8 trillion went.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty big accounting error.
Yes.
So who would give it? I was literally thinking George Washington as you made jokes about George Washington loss. But I guess a speech of his that was part of the original Stillwater speech night was his so his final speech as president when he basically abdicated his role, right? So he was the only or first he basically didn't run for a second term, and just gave up the presidency after being our nation's first president. And I feel like just that movement alone, and I know we have an entire episode on George. I don't know if it was that speech or not. We have a George Washington speech, and no, did that one not survive?
It's gone, and it was his first inaugural. And it was his first inaugural address.
But anyway, I feel like he would be the type of character who I would trust with that.
Quick answer: John McCain. You need someone who knows the cost of war.
Yeah.
What is the question again? One more time.
If you could pick any other past president, living or dead, or political figure to give this speech and be our president, 2000 to 2004, who is it?
I'm always intrigued with Mr. Henry Wallace, VP of Roosevelt from 40 to 44. Probably leaned way more towards the pacifist. His whole stance was, let the Soviets do the Soviets thing, we'll do our thing. Who cares? Really focused on just the plight of middle, lower class. Would be curious how he would have perhaps better allocated $8 trillion to foreign wars. So I'll choose Henry Wallace.
Interesting.
Former VP.
I'll be totally honest. Nothing really jumps to my mind, so I guess I'll just pick a famous one. I feel like it's almost a joke to say it, but like Abe Lincoln. I mean, he literally like saw us through a war, but he didn't seem to be like a warmonger. So maybe he could play the kind of the strength to do it, but don't really want to. And that might be a helpful attitude after something like this.
You know, every episode can't be a grand slam, but if you're still listening, thanks for hanging on here. Thanks for drinking.
And thinking.
And thinking. With us.
Thanks for drinking.
And thinking.
With us.
Hey, cue the music out there. Oh, who's on next? Matt?
Matt.
Come and go. Look toward the horizon. Up ahead you'll find a peace of mind, relief from the trying. I have burned a bridge, wrecked in a ditch, had to ask for